Our first presenter is Daniel Irwin from Crossrail, and he very kindly put a photograph up here so you can show the Bentley London office there, 20 Grace Church Street, 9th floor. So I recognise where some of us spend some of our time working. Over to you. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Innovation in Government category for Be Inspired. My name is Daniel Irwin. I'm a GIS technical analyst based at Crossrail, and what I'm hoping to show you today is how we've been working with Bentley to produce a better railway. However, before I do that, I'd like to give you a quick background on how Crossrail came into existence, and in order to do that, I need to go back to the 1970s. So, the 1970s in the UK, people looked a lot like that, computers looked like that, and trains, by and large, looked like that. More importantly, however, in 1974, the London Rail study was carried out to try and estimate where we could increase passenger capacity across the capital. And one of the main outputs of that was an east-west rail link through the heart of the city. However, during that period, unfortunately, due to financial and other reasons, it never materialised. If we now fast forward 34 years, I said it would be a brief history. We can see that Crossrail in 2008 was given the final approval, the parliamentary bill was passed, and construction could commence. And in 2009, the Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, pressed a big red button, and the first pile was driven into Canary Wharf to begin construction of a railway that would be like no other. So, that's a very brief history of how Crossrail came into existence. What I'd like to do now is just go through the agenda. Firstly, I'm going to look at the project challenges and goals. So, what's faced Crossrail along the route, and what goals do we hope to achieve? Next, I intend to look at the products and solutions, so the Bentley products that we're utilising to overcome those challenges and achieve those goals. And lastly, I'm going to look at the benefits and return on investment, so what are we actually seeing out of this? So, what are the challenges and goals that Crossrail face? Well, the first is simply the scope. In a word, Crossrail is immense. It's the largest infrastructure project in Europe, consisting of 90 kilometres of surface railway and 46 kilometres of new twin tunnels that will burrow under central London. It's going to carry around 200 million passengers a year when it opens. And from a technological point of view, we currently have a user base of around 800 users, but that will ramp up to around 14,000 users by the height of the construction in 2015. We face a number of different types of complexity, which I'd like to just run through. The first is the engineering complexity. As you can imagine, particularly in the central sections, we have a large engineering challenge ahead of us. At points, the tunnel itself will be some 40 metres below a ground surface that is a very heavily urbanised area. And on top of that, we need to take into account existing interfaces with other transport systems, such as London Underground, the Docklands Light Railway, and Network Rail. As well as all of that, we need to take into account assets and utilities that may be buried and offer problems with the construction of the railway. But it's not just an engineering challenge. Crossrail is essentially a wholly owned subsidiary of Transport for London, and as such we manage the construction of the railway rather than carrying it out ourselves. And we actually have a programme of work that consists of around 50 projects and around 200 contracts which are let to the supply chain. And what you can see here is those contracts, which includes an approximate geographical location and the type of contract, and in some cases the interfaces between the contracts. On top of both of those, we also now have the complexity of data and information. So we are collating information from a wide variety of sources, which includes property, engineering, assets, utilities, monitoring, built environment, traffic, as well as having to provide base mapping and gazetteer information to the supply chain and all other users. So historically, what we tend to see on these sorts of projects is as you move through each phase of the project and collating data and information, there tends to be a loss of information between the phase as data becomes redundant or inaccessible. And this leads to a general drop in the overall knowledge of the project. What we've done at Crossrail is we've implemented a data and information strategy which is intended to enable us to reuse, recycle and build upon the data from previous phases of the project. And this aligns with a BIM strategy. So where are we now? As you can see from the red line here, we're 4 years into the project. We're almost at the end of the engineering design phase. We're starting the main construction works, which includes the tunnelling. As you can see there, tunnelling was commenced in May of this year. We have a total of 6 tunnel boring machines that will be burrowing underneath London. 2 are currently in operation, and all 6 should be in operation by the end of 2013. And obviously, we will be delivering and opening the railway by 2018. So, that's the challenges and goals that we're attempting to face. So what I'm going to talk about now are some of the products and solutions that we use from Bentley to achieve those, to overcome those challenges and achieve those goals. So the first part of the data and information strategy that we put into place was the idea of having a central data hub that you can see there in the middle. This is a set of disparate repositories of information, and data would come in from the left into the central data hub and can be accessed by the various applications that you can see along the bottom, so ProjectWise, GeoWeb Publisher, EB. And it also means that the end user, be they CAD, GIS or document control, can access that same data source from a central system. Now, of course, having a set of data repositories is no good if they don't talk to each other. So what underpins all of this is our master data model, which is a framework that comprises the data that we would use between the systems and allows those systems to interact with one another seamlessly. So as well as creating data, we also need to control the workflow, the flow of data through our systems. And what you're seeing here is an implementation of that. This is the BS 1192 standard for workflow, which was implemented into ProjectWise. And we're already starting to see some actual benefits from doing so. With the CAD QA checks that are in place within the workflow within ProjectWise, we're now seeing up to 50 man days per month being saved. And as we move through into interface coordination between contracts and between projects, we're seeing even more time being saved. In this case, 26 on average man days per month per contract. So that's a lot of days. And so we see the end of the workflow. And because all of the contractors are using this common data environment, we're seeing that we can pull data from multiple contracts into single models. You can see here this Farringdon station was a model review that was carried out, and there is data coming in from no less than 5 different contracts, but they're all coming from the same data source in ProjectWise. What this has allowed us to do, as well as obviously create models, is to do things like design review, to do clash detection, and to even do 4D analysis. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the 4D analysis later in one of my case studies. So as well as the common data environment providing a framework for us to have data from the contractor, it also gives us the capability to give data to the contractor, to the supply chain. Historically, one of the major pieces of data that we needed to supply to the contractors was OS Master Map, which is the sort of building level detail background mapping that Ordnance Survey provide. And that's around 45 million records that get updated every quarter. So we needed to be able to provide that to the contractor, but also to provide it to other systems within our portfolio of products. Historically, that was taking up to 2 months to actually generate the outputs. But with the implementation of the ProjectWise Oracle connector, we've reduced that to just 3 days. And what we're seeing is a saving of around 17 man days per quarter through that automated process. So, as well as ProjectWise, we also use GeoWeb Publisher, which is Bentley's GIS solution, and this is Crossrail Maps, which is that implementation. And this is a spatial information portal for the users with over 500 layers of information available, which people can interrogate and view. And you can see it also links off into other systems. So in this example here, we've actually gone into ProjectWise, opened up a model, and then from there we can actually go into the Asset Information Management System. Now on top of that, we can also view EB documents. So we can go in and we can have a look at EB documents that are associated geographically with a location. And it also has access to other types of data, such as our image library and SAP. So, as well as the GIS providing a spatial information portal for users on the project, and this is accessible to everyone, both the contractors and internal staff, via the intranet and via Citrix. We can also use it as a delivery mechanism for some of the data that's being generated by those contracts. This example here is the C122 contract, which was a bored tunnel design contract. And what they did was they went out and they collected all of the assets that were within a 1 millimetre settlement contour. And there's about 18,000 assets, which you can see a breakdown of here. It included utilities, buildings, structures, and other subsurface features. And you can see the detail that's actually being created. And this was seamlessly integrated into Crossrail Maps without any need for any data transformations of any kind. What they also did with C122 was they gave us the capability to automatically upload that data from the GIS into ProjectWise, into a CAD environment via a simple set of user requests. And from there, they could output that to models and to other media. This actually ended up saving over 5,000 man-hours over the course of 12 months, these tools. And I'll go into a little bit more detail in a bit about how that breakdown occurred. So as well as design and construction, we're expected to hand over all of our assets that we're building to the operator and maintainer, which is Rail for London, at the end of the construction phase. And in order to do that, we've built a tool called the Asset Information Management System. And you can see here, there are two components to it. We have our asset model, which is a 3D model that's built in MicroStation, and we have an asset database, which is a collection of information about the asset that's stored within EB using its relational database capability. And obviously we need to link the two together. So how are we doing that? Well, what we did is, in collaboration with Bentley, Bentley have produced a new product, a new toolkit for MicroStation called the Asset Painter. What this allows us to do is we can take the asset model, which you can see at the top there, which is known as the element or canvas, and we can take the paint, which is the asset database, and we can use the brush to actually attach those asset tags to the asset model, so that we've got information behind the models that we're generating. And in terms of how many assets we're talking about, both the contractor and Crossrail will be collecting those assets over the next 6 years. By the end of this year, we're expected to have collected around 10,000 assets. In 2016, at the height of the asset collection phase, we're looking at collecting 130,000 assets in 1 year. And in total, we're looking at over 1 million assets that will be collected. Now, historically, what we did tend to find was that we had all of these systems, ProjectWise, EB, and others, but they all worked in a sort of siloed mentality in terms of how the user interacted with them. You know, if you wanted a drawing, you had to go to ProjectWise. If you wanted a document, you had to go to EB. What we're finding now is that the use of the GIS, Crossrail Maps, is providing that integrated solution so that all users can go into a single source initially to find out what they're interested in and what they're after, and then from there they can link off into the other systems. So, of course, we're building all of these tools and solutions. We need to let the supply chain and contractors know what it is we're doing. Therefore, in this year, in 2012, Bentley and Crossrail opened the Bentley Information Academy at Bentley's headquarters in London. And what this did was create a mirrored environment for the contractor to come in and understand and become aware of the processes and procedures as well as the toolkits that we're using within this environment. And it also gave us a positive feedback mechanism for them to be able to help us to enhance the tools that we're using. So, those are the products and tools that I'm going to talk about. Now I'm going to move on to the benefits and the return on investment that we're seeing. Before I go into the benefits, I just want to talk a couple of case studies to show some of the return on investment we're actually seeing now from the use of these tools. So the first one is the 4D modelling that I mentioned earlier. Now this was carried out at Farringdon Station during the design phase before construction and allowed the engineers to actually find where they were going wrong with the construction, where the timings were wrong, where there were clashes, and deal with those at the design phase before we actually moved into construction. Now, as a result of that, we actually saved £8 million on the construction of Farringdon Station for a cost of only £120,000 for the modelling. The second case study goes back to the C122 contract that I mentioned earlier, and the fact that we were saving 5,000 man-hours over the course of 12 months. Now, this was assessed on savings across 3 different areas. Data creation, so where data was being created, how it was being created and how we could improve that process. On information mining, so how the engineers and technicians were able to access the information in a better way. And on deliverable output as well, so using tools that we built to actually allow them to automatically upload data into ProjectWise to generate their CAD drawings, to generate reports, to generate lists and others. And like I said, we save over 5,000 hours over a 12-month period based on that criteria. So on to the general benefits that we're seeing across Crossrail. Firstly, there are savings. So we're finding that we've got a much more efficient information flow between systems, particularly with things like the Oracle Connector, allowing us to take data from one repository and to put it into another in ProjectWise. And again, this is saving us 17 man days per quarter. We're finding that we have better data management, particularly with the workflows that we're seeing, which is saving us those 26 man days per month per contract. We're finding that the information is much more accessible now across the board by everybody on the project, both Crossrail and the supply chain, through the use of Crossrail maps, where everybody has access to the same information at the same time. We're finding that we've got improved data interoperability, so we don't need to transform data because we're using the Bentley solutions. Things can work between systems without any need for any transformations. We're finding that we're not losing any data or information because of versioning, in particular in ProjectWise. We're able to reuse the data later in the project life cycle. And we're finding that there's no delay in data distribution. We're able to provide real-time access to the data to everybody concerned so that everyone is on the same page. So those are savings. We're also finding some efficiencies. Firstly, quality assurance of our data. Again, through the use of ProjectWise workflows, we're actually finding that we're improving the quality of the data that's coming in and that we're actually reducing the effort to provide that quality assurance. And again, we're seeing about 50 man days per month on that. We're able to mitigate better against risk. So we're seeing that this real-time data allows the users to actually access everything at the same time and to be able to make better decisions. Which leads on to improved decision making. As you saw with the 4D modelling example, we're seeing that because of the common data environment, because of everything we've got in place, we can actually do better, make better decisions. And lastly but not leastly, safety. In Crossrail we operate a target zero policy, which in its simplest form is that every person should be able to go home unhurt. And the idea is that with all of this information that we're providing to the contractors, to the supply chain, that they are better informed and that accidents can be avoided. So, although we can't predict what people will look like come 2018, we can tell you that the trains will look like this, and that we will have a railway that looks something like this. Thank you for your time. I'd welcome any questions.
Okay, the jurors get to ask questions first, then we'll take questions from the floor. So jurors, do you have questions?
That last plug for safety was excellent, and you know, that's an intangible that's hard to quantify, but fundamentally important to major projects like this. So, to your credit, that's a good thing to do. So, you've got these contractors that are coming in to do this very complex project. How are the contractors trained? So, I saw the Bentley Academy there, but these contractors didn't have this technology. I mean, they know how to do micro-tunneling and excavations. How did they get up to speed on this kind of technology to be a stakeholder with you?
Well, the contractors are obviously picked for a specific contract, and within the contract it defines how they should operate and how they should deliver. We obviously provide the Bentley Academy for them to understand our processes and tools, and it also gives us the ability to find out how they're doing it. In terms of other help, obviously we have the Bentley Learn, which that they have access to, and because of the ELS, the Enterprise License Subscription, it means they have access to all the tools that they need to do the job.
You used and gave some good examples of actual time savings on the various aspects. For instance, 26 days a month per contract. Can you tell me what that is roughly in percentage terms of the actual time that it's taken?
I probably couldn't tell you in percentage terms, I'm afraid. I know that obviously it is saving a lot of time, and where we've got something like 200 contracts, obviously you're then talking, if you extrapolate that out, to around 5,500, I think it is, man days per month being saved through those efficiency gains. But I'm afraid I couldn't tell you what percentage that is.
Where I was getting at, it is clearly a humongous project, which is an English term for very large. It would be just nice to get an idea of the overall effort that's going into some of these phases. So, but if you haven't got that, that's not a problem.
So at this conference we saw that Bentley's getting ready to do something called Bentley Connect, and you're going through 2018. Do you anticipate using something like Bentley Connect and going into a cloud situation for this specific project? And then the latter part of that question is, how will you hand off, when the design and construction is done, how will you hand off all that valuable data that you've got to the people that are going to operate and maintain this for the life of the project?
Okay. I certainly think there's room to use the Bentley Connect technology that's been introduced. Certainly we already provide ProjectWise Explorer and the Crossrail Maps interface over a Citrix or web-based environment, so it does allow you to actually access it from anywhere. But certainly I see that there may be the need for something like Bentley Connect further down the line. In terms of handover, we already work very closely with Rail for London, who are going to be the operators and maintainers, and we've worked religiously with the existing infrastructure, such as London Underground. In fact, a lot of the coding structures that are sitting in that master data model are based on the coding structures they use within London Underground, so the integration should be seamless.
Okay, I think we can take questions from the floor. Who's got a question they'd like to ask?
You mentioned a number of time savings throughout the whole presentation, man-hours. Say, what's your benchmark for analyzing those time savings?
I think it depends on the time saving in question. I think certainly for the workflows, they looked at what was going on previous to that implementation and how they were actually finding that the times were where things were being lost without that automation. It was taking a lot more time to get through that quality assurance. Certainly in terms of the 17 days per quarter, that's certainly rigorous. That was rigorously benchmarked based on, again, our previous experience. We only implemented the Oracle connector in the last 12 months, so we had a series of benchmarks from previous attempts to load this data. And what was the other one? I think there was another time saving. I don't know.
More questions? Okay, if there aren't any more questions, I want to thank you very much for that excellent presentation, that superb video at the end.
Thank you.
Thank you.